On the 1st of April 1990, an Arizona state trooper pulled over a tractor-trailer on Interstate 10 near Casa Grande. It was a routine traffic stop. The truck had a blinking light. The trooper approached the cab to investigate, but what he found would haunt him for the rest of his life, and it would open America's eyes to a dangerous underworld. Right now, as you're listening to this, there are multiple serial killers driving on America's highways. Not in movies, not in fiction, but right now in real life. They're operating in plain sight, hidden among millions of legitimate truck drivers, moving across state lines. And the FBI has been hunting them for over 2 decades. In 2004, an analyst from the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation noticed something disturbing. Bodies of murdered women were being dumped along Interstate 40, not just in Oklahoma, but in Texas, Mississippi, and multiple states, in multiple jurisdictions. The pattern was unmistakable. Someone or some people were using America's highways as a hunting ground. What the FBI discovered would shock the nation. At least 850 murders, possibly more. Over 450 suspects. And the chilling truth? Long-haul trucking is the #1 profession of serial killers in America.
In 2004, after noticing a pattern of murdered women being dumped along interstates, the FBI launched its Highway Serial Killings Initiative. The map you see behind me shows where bodies and remains have been found along highways in 500 cases over the course of 30 years. 20 years later, the FBI's work has led to several arrests and to hundreds of suspects.
This is the story of how the FBI launched the Highway Serial Killings Initiative. This is the story of the predators they hunt. In 2003, a crime analyst was reviewing cold cases. She was looking at bodies found along highways, mostly women, dumped in remote locations, scattered across multiple states. And then she saw it, the pattern, the connection. These weren't random murders, they were linked. These were the work of someone or some people who understood how to exploit the system. She reached out to other police departments. She contacted the FBI, and what she discovered would change everything. Now, this analyst was given access by the FBI to a national database of violent crimes. It's designed to connect cases across jurisdictions, to find patterns that local police might miss, to identify serial offenders who move from state to state, leaving bodies in their wake. When the FBI analysts began entering data about these highway murders, they were stunned. The numbers kept growing. 50 cases, 100 cases, 200 cases, and by 2004, they had identified more than 500 murdered women found along or near America's highways. And they had a list of approximately 200 potential suspects. But here's the thing that made this different. The vast majority of suspects were long-haul truck drivers. Think about it. A long-haul truck driver has access to a mobile crime scene, an 18-wheeler, 80,000 pounds of steel and iron. They can pick up a victim at a truck stop in Georgia, they can drive for hours, commit their crime, and then leave the victim on the side of the road in Florida, all in a single day, all across multiple jurisdictions. The victim has no connection to the area where they were found. There are no witnesses, there's no forensic evidence linking them to the crime scene because the crime scene was moving. The crime scene was a truck travelling down the interstate at 60 miles per hour. If local police in Florida are investigating a Jane Doe they found on the roadside, they have no idea she was picked up in Georgia. They have no idea she lost her life in Alabama. They have no idea the killer is already in South Carolina looking for his next victim. This is the perfect crime. This is why long-haul trucking attracts serial killers. This is why the FBI realised they were facing a crisis. The victims in these cases share a tragic commonality. They're women living high-risk transient lifestyles. Many are hitchhikers, many are runaways. They're vulnerable, they're marginalised. They're the women society often forgets. These women are picked up at truck stops. They're looking for clients, they're looking for money, or they're looking for survival. And instead, they find death. And so, in 2004, the FBI launched the Highway Serial Killings Initiative. It was an unprecedented effort to coordinate investigations across state lines. They used a special database to identify patterns, to catch killers who had been operating in the shadows for years. The initiative created a national matrix of murder victims. It compiled a list of suspects. It developed timelines using driving records, truck routes, and camera footage. It brought together law enforcement agencies from multiple states to share information and coordinate investigations. By 2009, when the FBI publicly announced the initiative, they had already made significant progress. At least 10 suspects believed responsible for some 30 homicides had been placed in custody. But the work was far from over. In fact, it was just the beginning. On the 1st of April 1990, an Arizona state trooper pulled over a tractor-trailer on Interstate 10 near Casa Grande. It was a routine traffic stop. The truck had a blinking light. The trooper approached the cab to investigate. Inside the cab, chained to the wall, was a woman. She was hysterical, she was screaming, she was covered in bruises, and she was begging for help. Her name was Lisa Pennell. She had been kidnapped by Robert Ben Rhodes, and she was one of the lucky ones because she survived. Robert Ben Rhodes was born in Council Bluffs, Iowa in 1945. He was dishonorably discharged from the Marines for robbery. He was rejected from law enforcement. He drifted through various jobs, stores, supermarkets, warehouses, restaurants, and then he became a long-haul trucker. And that's when the killing began. Rhodes had a fetish for captivity and torture. He modified the sleeper cab of his truck, installing anchor points for shackles. He created a travelling torture chamber. He called himself Whips and Chains. He told his victims he had been doing this for 15 years. When he was arrested in 1990, investigators began linking him to unsolved murders across the country. They used his truck routes, they used driving records, they used photographs found in his possession, and they discovered that Rhodes was suspected of torturing, assaulting, and taking the lives of more than 50 women between 1975 and 1990. Rhodes became known as the truck stop killer, and he was convicted of 2 murders, but he's suspected of up to 50. He's serving life without parole. The next case we'll look at is Keith Jesperson. The happy-face killer Keith Jesperson was a long-haul trucker from Canada. He became known as the happy-face killer because he drew smiley faces in letters to the media, taking credit for his murders. Between 1990 and 1995, Jesperson confessed to strangling 8 victims across multiple states. He claimed the number was much higher. He insisted it was 160, but law enforcement has only confirmed at least 8.
Yesterday, in an exclusive interview with Channel 2 News, alleged murderer Keith Jesperson confessed to being the so-called happy-face killer. He now admits to killing 8 people during a murder spree across 5 western states since 1990.
And forced my fist into her throat, and later grabbed the rope and tied it around her neck securely, and she was dead.
Jesperson would strangle women at rest areas and bars, and he would leave their bodies along the interstate. And then he would write letters to the media, drawing smiley faces, bragging about his crimes. Jesperson was caught in 1995, and he's serving multiple life sentences. But the terror he inflicted on his victims, the trauma he caused their families, the fear he instilled in women travelling on America's highways, that'll never be erased. And now for the gruesome case of Wayne Adam Ford. The dismemberer Wayne Adam Ford was a long-haul truck driver from California. In 1998, he walked into the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department and confessed to killing 4 women. He had a severed body part in his pocket. Ford had strangled his victims and dismembered 3 of them. He turned himself in, confessed. He's serving a death sentence in San Quentin State Prison. But here's what's chilling. Ford is just one of dozens of convicted serial killer truckers. There are at least 25 long-haul truckers currently serving time in prison for multiple homicides. And the FBI estimates there are hundreds more who have never been caught. Now let's look at the statistics. The numbers are staggering. The FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative has identified at least 850 murders linked to long-haul truckers. 200 of those cases are still active and unsolved. The FBI has a list of approximately 450 suspects. Think about that. 450 suspects. Suspects in unsolved murders. Suspects who may still be driving on America's highways. Suspects who may still be hunting. And these aren't just historical cases. These aren't just the crimes from the 1980s and 1990s. The predators are still out there. The FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative is a coordinated effort to identify, investigate, and prosecute serial killers who target victims along America's highways. The initiative uses a technique called linkage analysis. And linkage analysis is the process of matching physical and behavioural evidence from multiple crime scenes to determine whether they're associated with a specific offender or set of offenders. It uses probability analysis. It uses psychological profiling. It uses data from truck routes, driving records, and camera footage. The FBI maintains a database of more than 850 cases, and each case contains information about the victim, the location where the body was found, the circumstances of the murder, and any potential suspects. Analysts review this data looking for patterns, looking for connections, looking for threads that link seemingly unrelated murders across multiple states. But here's the challenge. The victims are often marginalised. They're homeless, they're runaways, they're victims of trafficking. They're the people that society often forgets. And because they're forgotten, their cases often go unsolved for years or decades. Local police departments are overwhelmed. They're dealing with crimes in their own jurisdictions. They're not thinking about a murder that happened 3 states away. They're not connecting the dots because they don't know what the dots are. That's where the FBI comes in. The FBI has the resources. They have the technology. They have the expertise to connect cases across jurisdictions, to identify patterns, to catch killers who have been operating in the shadows. Frank Veluzzi is a former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence. He served in the FBI for 25 years. He directed all espionage investigations across the government, and then he became fascinated by the Highway Serial Killings Initiative. Veluzzi wanted to understand the subculture of long-haul trucking. He wanted to understand why this profession attracts serial killers. He wanted to understand the victims. He wanted to understand the investigation. So he did something extraordinary. He rode a truck for more than 2,000 miles. He slept in the sleeper berth. He experienced the isolation. He experienced the loneliness. He experienced the stress of operating an 80,000-pound vehicle down the interstate. And what he discovered was both enlightening and terrifying. Long-haul trucking is a unique subculture. Truckers exist for days or weeks at a time in a world of their own. They speak their own language, they eat at their own establishments, they sleep in their own rigs. They're part cowboy, part fighter pilot, part hermit. They glide along the edge of a certain seam in the fabric of society, the seam that separates their reality from ours. And killer truckers exploit that seam.
I rode flatbed, which is a different kind of very active physical trucking, with a very gracious driver who tolerated me for over 2,000 miles. An 18-wheeler is a mobile crime scene. What do I mean by that? These killers are grabbing their victims in one jurisdiction, killing or raping them in a second jurisdiction, and dumping the body in a third jurisdiction.
The job is mentally and physically taxing. It's tedious and solitary. Drivers spend hours on end in a sedentary position. There's little or no human engagement. The stress is immense. They're operating a vehicle that weighs 80,000 pounds. They know they have the power of life or death, and the health consequences are severe. Studies show that 10% of truckers drink alcohol every day. 25% binge drink 5 or more drinks at a time, and 44% are experiencing symptoms of major clinical depression. And this is the environment. This is the subculture. This is where serial killers thrive. Ferluzzi also interviewed women who had survived violent encounters with truckers. He interviewed trafficking victims. He interviewed social workers. He interviewed law enforcement. And he discovered that the victims share tragic commonalities. Trauma at an early age. Trauma in the family. Serious medical problems in the family. Dysfunction somewhere along the line. The FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative continues to work. They continue to investigate, they continue to link cases, and they continue to identify suspects. They continue to bring killers to justice. But the work is never finished, because as long as there are predators on America's highways, as long as there are potential victims at truck stops, as long as there are gaps in law enforcement and seams between jurisdictions, the killing will continue. Technology is changing the landscape. Modern trucking companies are using cameras. They're using GPS tracking and electronic logging devices, and this makes it harder for predators to operate undetected. But it's not a complete solution. Some predators leave their trucks to look for victims, some ride-share services, some operate independently outside the corporate trucking industry. And the rise of online appointments has created new vulnerabilities. Victims are still at risk, they're still being targeted, but for the FBI, the hunt continues. Analysts at the FBI office near Quantico, Virginia, maintain a map of the United States, and it's covered in red dots. Each dot represents a murder. Each dot represents a victim. Each dot represents a family destroyed. It represents a life stolen. There are more than 850 red dots on that map, and the number keeps growing. The FBI has identified 450 suspects. Some have been caught, some have been convicted, some are serving life sentences, but others are still out there. Others are still driving, others are still hunting. What does the future hold? Will technology make it impossible for predators to operate? Will law enforcement prevent these murders? Will society finally value the lives of marginalised women enough to protect them? The answers are uncertain, but what is certain is this. The FBI will continue to hunt. The investigators will continue to work. The analysts will continue to connect those dots. And justice, however delayed, will continue to be pursued. Right now, as you're listening to this, there are multiple serial killers driving on America's highways. They're operating in plain sight, hidden among millions of legitimate truck drivers. They're moving across state lines with impunity. But they're not invisible. The FBI sees them. The investigators see them. The analysts see them. And one by one, they're being caught. One by one, they're being brought to justice. The Highway Serial Killings Initiative is one of the most important investigations in FBI history. It's a coordinated effort to protect vulnerable women. It's a commitment to justice. It's a promise that no victim will be forgotten. The hunt continues. The investigation continues. And the red dots on the map serve as a reminder of the lives lost, the families destroyed, and the ongoing battle against the predators who hunt on America's highways. This is the story of the FBI hunting serial killer truckers, and it's a story that's still being written.